I wanted to take a moment here to introduce our next speaker. Our final panel for the day is Diversity and Equity in Finance, and that'll be moderated by Colleen Harvey, who is the Chief Financial Officer for Karl Strauss Brewing Company. Her experience spans over 30 years in private industry and as a CPA in public accounting. She serves on the Finance and Audit Committee of the San Diego Unified School District and is the chair these days of the San Diego County Treasury Oversight Committee. Welcome, Colleen.
Thank you, Jan. Good afternoon, everyone. Our next topic, diversity, equity, and inclusion, made me pause and reflect on some personal life experiences. When I began my career in accounting and finance, there were many women in the workforce. However, there was little diversity in senior management and very few female executives. Today, it is so exciting to see that companies are now beginning to focus on creating a culture of inclusion and an environment where people of diverse backgrounds can bring all of who they are to work in collaboration with others to achieve success. It is my great pleasure and honor to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Hei-ock, to discuss diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. Dr. Kim is the founder and executive director of the Kim Center for Social Balance. The Kim Center accelerates the achievement of equal status for all genders in the workplace. The Kim Center works with employers and communities using data-driven tools to collaboratively design and implement actionable plans and transform company culture, local culture, and generate lasting change. Dr. Kim herself has dedicated over a decade to nonprofit administration and social justice, environmental conservation, and the arts. She was an educator for over 30 years. She serves on the board of Workforce Ventures and is a member of Mana de San Diego, Women in Public Finance, and Lawyers Club of San Diego. Dr. Kim is a frequent speaker and has served as a subject matter expert on workplace gender equity for KPBS Midday Edition, Employee Rights Center, Women in Public Finance, the Lawyers Club, and former San Diego Council member Barbara Bry. Please help me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Hei-ock.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Colleen. I'm excited to be here. Just to see who's in the audience today, let's do a quick poll. Does your workplace have a diversity, equity, and inclusion program? Yes, no, or not sure. And this can be any effort to raise awareness, whether it's existing or brand new, formal or informal. And if your workplace is just starting one, go ahead and click yes.
And we'll give everyone about another 10 seconds to input your answer, and we'll take a look at the results.
Thanks. I like taking the temperature of agencies and other employers to see how much awareness is growing.
Okay, let's go ahead and input your final answers, and we'll end the poll at this time, and let's take a look at the results. So 54% of you said yes, 19% no, and 27% said not sure.
Well, it's nice to see that more than half of you are aware of something that's going on in your company. The ones who are saying not sure that's a significant issue, because if your company is doing something, they need to get the message out. And if they're not doing something, then people are noticing the gap.
Dr. Kim, why do workplaces need diversity, equity, and inclusion programs?
Great question. So even though the first suffrage movement began 100 years ago, and women today contribute more to the US economy every year than Japan's entire GDP, I hope you all heard me clearly on that, Japan's entire GDP, women still have second-class status in the workplace. As a result, the pay gap is closing at a snail's pace, which I think you have all been hearing a lot about in the past couple of days or week. Even in the public sector, where salaries and job descriptions are transparent, it can be as high as 10%. And we can't take our eyes off the ball even for a moment. For example, Latina Equal Pay Day actually moved backwards 18 days between 2018 and 2019. Women are still leaving or being stymied in the highest paying fields like finance because of glass ceilings. Women comprise more than 40% of financial services employees overall, but only 15% of executives. And a lot of this is because they're socially and professionally funneled into lower paying positions. So it's not always just, being paid less for the same work, although that does unfortunately happen. DEI programs help raise awareness and teach us to value the contributions of all employees with all backgrounds. And this is key to the workplace equity movement.
So what is workplace equity?
Workplace equity is the tool for leveling the playing field so all employees receive equal status. When a company has a culture of equal status for all employees, it means that everyone, regardless of their gender, race, ethnicity, parent status, veteran, disability status, or sexual orientation, actually receives the respect and opportunities for advancement that they deserve as compared to everyone else. It is very similar to a balance sheet. So, it's what you need to get to even. It means that employers do two main things. First, admit that certain groups don't enjoy equal status. And then secondly, employers must take conscious steps to do what's needed, whether it's adding support or removing obstacles. Now, people often get confused between equality and equity. Equality is an employer saying that Rosa and David have exactly the same opportunity to achieve a leadership role because they have exactly the same qualifications and skills. Equity is leadership first, recognizing that the decision makers don't even consider promoting Rosa because she just had a baby, and they assume she won't want to come right back to work and that she will be distracted by her new mom needs. And then second, leadership makes sure that the decision makers have training to overcome their biases about mothers, and that Rosa has an easily accessible and private pumping room. That's an example, very important example.
So why are things moving so slowly?
I hear over and over again from company leaders that they don't even know where to start when it comes to leveling the playing fields because they don't have, and this is really through no fault of their own, they don't have a clear vision of what gender equity looks like. They don't have a reliable way of measuring progress or a convincing method of demonstrating how it benefits their company. And this, of course, is very key, right? Any leadership has to demonstrate ROI. And then lastly, there truly is a lack of social evolution past our gender-based myths. Sally Krawcheck, former Wall Street executive and founder of Ellevest, said, "It's actually viewed as an attractive female characteristic to be bad with money." And mind you, this is a myth of convenience because whoever controls the money holds the power. And I hate to say it, but women perpetuate these stereotypes frequently during critical periods of growth for young people. As teachers, for example, they tend to reward boys for taking risks, but discourage girls when they fail, especially in areas that aren't conventionally feminine.
So what are the critical success factors to creating workplace equity?
Well, when it comes to cultural transformation, you absolutely need leadership from the top. Then you need a measurable, data-driven plan. Just like if you wanted to get fit, you don't rely on wishful thinking and then hope for the best, right? You look for clearly defined metrics, tested strategies, and expert guidance, whether that comes from, the magazine you see at the checkout counter, or you look online, or you know somebody. Finally, you look for a way to measure your progress. And at this point, I always advise people to rely on the experts. Believe me, decades have gone into studying workplace equity. So the metrics and methodologies are already out there. You don't want to spend the time and the energy to make up your own. After all, we rely on you all as financial experts to build a portfolio, assess risk tolerance, answer our questions, etc. Cultural transformation is just as serious as financial investment, particularly because you're talking about change that might need to happen over decades. Consider this. In an environment that isn't already accepting of diversity, at least to some degree, there can be backlash within 2 years of implementing an initiative. This is actually playing out right now, and 75% of diversity trainings are failing or making things worse. Think about that. 3/4 of the diversity trainings that are out there are bombing.
Wow.
But the good news is that within 12 years of these particularly hostile environments, there is significant improvement in social trust and quality of life. For that kind of sustainability, though, you need someone who knows how to use the long lens. Here's a video that I like that demonstrates knowledgeable insight to create human connection. It's 4 minutes, but I think you'll enjoy it.
I would describe my political views as the new right.
I'd say that I'm left.
Feminism today is man-hating.
I would describe myself as a feminist, 100%.
I don't believe that climate change exists.
We're not taking enough action on climate change.
I think it's about time these people got off their high horse and started looking for credible problems that actually exist.
It's absolutely critical that trans people have their own voice.
That's not right. You can't, you're a man, be a man, or you're a female, be a female.
Women do need to remember that we need you to have our children.
Could I be friends with someone that says a woman's place is in the home?
Right, okay, well, I'm an expert at flat packs. If you have any trouble, just watch me.
So it looks like I've got your instructions here.
I think so. Let me help you.
It's not just that bit there.
Describe what it is like to be you in 5 adjectives.
Okay, frustrating.
Dedicated.
Opinionated.
Lucky.
Ambitious.
Offensive.
Solemn. I have ups and downs.
Strong.
I want to say attacked, misunderstood.
Name 3 things you and I have in common.
We're both male, we're both confident, and we're both loudly spoken.
We know each other better than people who've known each other for 10 minutes should.
You seem quite ambitious and positive, and you've got this really, got a glow. Do you know what I'm saying? Your aura's pretty cool.
I'm sensing, are you former military or something?
People have said that, but there is no history. So are you then ex-military?
Yeah.
If you're ex-military, I'm very proud of you already.
Well,
So
I grew up in a bit of a rough state. I've experienced homelessness. I've known what it's like to have absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm definitely most grateful just for life.
We've only just met, but I think you're the sort of person that would listen to me and we'd have a discussion rather than argue.
Yeah, you could hang out with, man.
let's go. My chance.
Goodness sake.
You're right, mate.
Fitter than I look.
Perfecto.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
So basically, I think we just built a bar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here you are. Each take a bottle and place it on its corresponding markings on the bar.
Attention, please now stand to watch a short film.
Feminism today is definitely an excuse for misandry, man-hating.
If somebody said to me that climate change is destroying the world, then I'd say that is total piffle.
So transgender, it is very odd. We're not set up to understand or see things like that.
I am a daughter, a wife. I am transgender.
I feel like the battle for feminism definitely isn't done. The fight is never going to be over, if I'm honest with you.
You now have a choice. You may go, or you can stay and discuss your differences over a beer.
I'm only joking.
You had me for a second then.
Well, I'm having a drink.
I'm having a drink.
Yeah.
I want to discuss.
Beer.
Yeah, beer and discuss.
Cheers.
At the end of the day, mate,
About
I've enjoyed
reaching out to
working with
people,
you.
yeah. And, you know, even if you wanted to convince people about your point, the productive thing to do would be to sit down and have a
Just
beer.
engage.
I've been brought up in a way where everything's black and white, but life isn't black and white.
Yeah, I'm just me.
Yeah.
Smash the patriarchy.
I'll give you my mobile number, you give me yours, and we'll keep in touch. I'd have to tell my girlfriend that I'll be texting another girl. She might be a bit upset with that, but I'll have to get round that.
I'll have to tell my girl.
She'll have to lump it.
I hope you enjoyed that. I've seen that so many times, and each time it gets to me, it gets to my heart. And that actually is one of the reasons why I feel that it demonstrates insightful psychology very well. Obviously, not every employer can have their employees building bars and drinking beer together at work, much as we would love that. But some of the core principles that I love they address are that it pulls away from the issues and focuses on personal interactions with no judgment. There's collaborative activity rewarding working together to build something. There's emphasizing commonalities to lower the threat of difference. And this is huge. Once you start bringing up the issues, there's a big danger that people are going to feel defensive or attacked. And that's really, I mean, they're different sides of the same coin. And that's really important to acknowledge. And finally, it's an exercise that anyone can relate to, whether they participate, in drinking beer or not. It's a concept that everyone sees in TV, in real life, hears about regardless of their background.
So, Dr. Kim, if change could take decades, how does a company preserve the momentum toward an equitable corporate culture?
That's a great question. A good plan combines long-term vision with shorter-term, manageable, measurable milestones to preserve engagement. Your plan also needs buy-in from all stakeholder groups, and that's your board, that's your leadership, middle management, all your other staff. And your plan has to bring both marginalized and privileged groups together to generate understanding, allyship, and collaboration, much in the same way as that video. So right now, I'd like to ask the audience two poll questions that speak to a couple elements that can affect your success in generating this buy-in. The first one is, do you feel that your workplace leadership fairly represents all genders, races, ethnicities, and sexual orientation? And I realize that fair is a subjective judgment, but that's what we're going for. And I fully acknowledge that I'm only calling out some intersections of marginalization, really in the interest of time.
We'll just take a few more seconds to input your answers. And we'll go ahead and wrap up our poll here. Let's take a look at the results. Okay, we've got 53% saying yes, 29% partially, 15% no, and 3% not sure.
Okay, thank you, Jason. So for those who said yes, there's a good chance that most people already feel included enough to buy into a company-wide or agency-wide initiative. And it's nice to see that that is the majority of this group. For those who answered partially or no, your employer needs to explore if there are groups that feel marginalized or voiceless, to what extent and in what ways. And for those who said, I don't know, this is an important group to address. Even though it was a tiny percent of this particular group, an employer needs to know how many people are not aware. It's just like when I asked you about whether or not you were aware of whether or not you are aware of a company-wide initiative for DEI. Because if people don't know what the reality is, they can't react to it. And that's what you want for buy-in. You need to have that reaction. So the second poll question is led into by this. How does your leadership representation impact your feelings of belonging at work? And I'm going to stay quiet for a moment so you can really think about your answer.
We'll do about another 30 seconds. If you haven't input your answer, go ahead and do so now. Okay, we'll go ahead and wrap up our poll, and let's take a look at the results. 51% of you said positively, 18% negatively, 23% said it doesn't have an impact on me, and 8% said that you don't know.
Yeah, the answers to this poll question more or less track the answers to the last one. I asked this question because it can give you a personal experience of why equity matters, an opportunity to examine how you feel about your job and how your job makes you feel about yourself, and then how you feel can impact your decision to stay, the quality of your work, your creativity, etc. Employers need to pay attention because these issues of retention, productivity, and innovation will ultimately impact your company's profitability and performance. So I know agencies talk less about their bottom line, but you still need to protect and grow your human capital, and performance is still very much a priority. Plus, if you're going to take advantage of the new generations of talent, millennials, for example, expect social awareness from their employers, and they're much less likely to remain at companies just out of a sense of loyalty or consistency. Plus, I understand agencies do a lot of hiring from each other, so this could be key as well. The last thing I'm going to emphasize today along these lines is to build workplace equity into your budget. Not as a nice to have in fair weather or as a convenient response during times of social pressure, but as a genuine business priority, because only by formally dedicating resources can an agency or company plan for success and become the magnet for talent that sets you apart from all other agencies or companies.
Clearly, there's a lot involved in moving the needle. So how is the Kim Center driving change?
Thanks for asking, Colleen. The mission of the Kim Center is to accelerate equal status for all genders, races, and ethnicities in the workplace. This is because we as a nation are far from where we need to be, and progress isn't happening fast enough. It's not organic. It's not an organic process. This is highlighted especially now with the devastating impact that COVID has had on all working women, and particularly women of color. To accomplish our mission, the Kim Center created a data-driven program called Gender Leap. We slice and dice the data pertaining to women because they are the only group, the one group whose equitable treatment benefits every other group. Gender Leap analyzes key metrics at multiple intersections, including race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, caregiver and disability status, and more. However, we do also look at the data for men of color as a whole. There are 3 components: a rigorous assessment deployed annually for employers that eliminates any mystery about how to measure workplace equity. We are trying to shortcut the process for you. And the assessment includes metrics for correlating equity to your ability to attract talent, keep your talent, make that talent productive, creative, etc. The second step is a custom playbook, which outlines clear roles and goals and timelines for every stakeholder group. And this gets into the company or agency-wide buy-in. And then the last piece is a national accreditation based on an employer's assessment scores. The accreditation is key for standardizing benchmarks across industries, sectors, regions, and time. This has been a critical gap in the workplace equity movement because we've been comparing apples to oranges, which makes it very difficult to talk meaningfully about progress. The Gender Leap accreditation allows all of us to talk about progress in concrete terms, use the same terms, and it allows employers to self-identify as truly moving the needle to potential employees, investors, or customers anywhere in the country. If you're making progress, you deserve the acknowledgement.
So will we get there one company at a time?
Absolutely not. That's why Gender Leap also seeks to unite regions and employers around common tools and strategies, so everyone understands progress in the same way. It's actually the only initiative in the country that's doing this, and it's based on research that tells us widespread cultural transformation requires focused local action. The Kim Center is actually working with San Diego leaders right now to transform San Diego County into a model of progress that we can replicate nationally in all other regions. And I'm proud to say that we've received commendations for our work and spearheaded historic workplace gender equity days at the California state, county, and city levels.
Wow, that's awesome.
Thank you.
So what should employers take away from the pandemic regarding workplace equity?
Yeah, trends are indicating that universally prioritizing workplace equity may be essential to full economic recovery on a global scale. And then, of course, that means on a regional scale as well, and within your own company. Advancing gender equity alone can add, I'm going to throw out a big number here, $13 trillion to the global GDP by 2030.
Wow.
Doing nothing reduces that figure by more than $5 trillion. So there are big consequences. Right now, women are leaving the workforce at 4 times the rate of men. So here's another thing for employees to think about. They're learning some hard lessons about what they need and want out of an employer in terms of support, pay equity, and advancement opportunities. So as an employer, you might want to think about when they start coming back to work, because they will be looking with new eyes for environments that demonstrate how they're valued.
So, Dr. Kim, we're about halfway through. Are there any more questions or thoughts that you'd like to discuss with the audience, or do we want to open up for polling questions right now? Or not polling questions, but questions from the audience.
Yeah, we can open it up to questions from the audience. I'd love to hear what you're thinking.
I am
still waiting. Yeah, we're still waiting for a couple of questions, I think, to come in. So if you have any initial ones, why don't we get started with those, and then we'll go to audience questions as they come in. And again, to access questions, you can go down to the bottom of the Q&A button and submit them there. We'd love to take your questions.
Great.
Well, Colleen, we can ask you a question.
Actually, yes, I'm happy to take an answer. So, but I see some questions now, and I'm going to read some if you'd like.
Okay.
One of the questions are, Doctor, you said that 3/4 of DEI initiatives are failing. How is this discovered?
Harvard Business Review did a study, and they found that there are some key elements that contribute to this failure. One of them is that lack of customization, bringing an out of the box solution into an environment without taking into account who's there and what their reactions might be. Another contributor was making it mandatory. And the third one that I recall was applying it only to specific groups. So again, getting back to that total buy-in factor, they were just applying trainings to management, middle management, for example, and not addressing leadership and not addressing other groups in the staff.
Another question from the audience. I'm reading from the polling questions. What does it mean to budget for DEI?
Good question. And that's something that this group, this is actually the first time I've been asked this question, and I shouldn't be surprised. So the Gender Leap program, for example, that I talked about, that the Kim Center has, there's a cost involved. And there needs to be due process for incorporating any kind of formal program into the budget. You need to account for it every year. We do the assessment, as I mentioned, every year on a client's environment, and that playbook could change every year. So really annually for the foreseeable future and even beyond, there are very real costs. It could be, tens of thousands. It could be hundreds of thousands. It would be great. So actually, one of the things that the Kim Center will be doing probably in the next year is creating a certification program for individual providers to implement Gender Leap within their own companies, so they don't always have to come to the Kim Center for that. And so if you can create a budget for creating that position, I know a lot of companies are creating DEI positions and DEI departments, which is fantastic. That means that's in the budget. However, you really need to be careful about how you do that as well. Don't just pull someone in, throw them in the deep end and say, okay, we need to be better. You need to develop your milestones and then track how you're accomplishing those. And if I haven't quite answered your questions, please, ask me more fine-tuned questions.
So another question from the audience. We have a workplace which is made up primarily of females of one particular minority. However, other minorities feel excluded. Have you faced this type of situation?
I have. As a matter of fact, one of our clients recently is predominantly female employees. And they were pretty confident that they were going to learn that they needed to pay more attention to their minority male population, for example. This is not a direct translation to your situation, because they actually found that women of color were still feeling marginalized and still had less access to the pipeline than white women. So they actually had the same problems that everybody else has. If you think that there is that issue within your company, you really need to find out for sure. I mean, the only way to understand the impact of discrimination or the extent of discrimination is to talk to and give voice to the populations that are being impacted, that are being discriminated against. So I urge you to, either come to me for the Gender Leap assessment or do some sort of assessment that is created in tandem or in collaboration with those populations. The worst thing you could do is to just have a group of maybe 3 people from upper management saying, I think these are good questions to ask, because that's where we started when we created the assessment. We thought, well, we've heard so much about discrimination in the workplace. I think it's pretty obvious what questions we need to ask. Instead, we went to the literature and we found out, we assessed all the metrics that are being used from the UN down to a local consultancy to an association, an affinity association, and then went to the literature and found out which questions, when asked, actually result in improving the environment. So for example, if your company has an affinity group, that's actually not a usable metric. If you're just testing how people, but if you're asking about microaggressions and then you address microaggressions, that is a demonstrable metric. I mean, that's a metric with demonstrable measurements. I'm sorry, I'm getting tangled up in my words. You can demonstrate improvement and then correlated improved progress when you ask those questions repeatedly. Sorry.
So talking about metrics, what key metrics should be measured to determine progress? And then how often should they be measured?
They should be measured. There should be an annual assessment. Absolutely. And then there are many situations where pulse checks are very useful, and they can be just, one question surveys on an app just to take the temperature. Some really important questions that employers need to ask themselves is, how are we holding ourselves accountable for progress publicly and internally? Do we have comprehensive work-family policies like childcare referral or dedicated lactation facilities or paid family leave beyond state requirements? Do we have a strong internal labor market, if that applies to you? Is there hiring from within? Are there internal job postings? Are there management training programs? Does our team have the technical skills to deliver beyond compliance? And this is in the form of delivering formal or informal mentorship, networking programs, sponsorship programs. Can they implement blind screening for interview candidates? Do you have enough diversity for diverse interview panels, or do you need to go outside? And then when you're talking to employees, you want to ask them about their experiences accessing the pipelines to advancement. And then questions even around allyship. So we've found that because we survey all employees, not just women and not just certain groups, we have found that there can often be a difference in responses from white men, for example, in their perception of the existence of discrimination within an environment, and women, and particularly women of color. So you want to ask questions around that. Are there DI programs in your company? Do you feel that they're having an effect? Do you feel, how do you feel your colleagues are treating you? And it's generally better for white men or whatever the privileged group is in your environment than it is for the typically marginalized groups.
So another question from the audience. This is, can we get your contact information?
Oh, absolutely. Let's see. Well, first of all, our website is kimcenter.org. Very straightforward. Maybe I'll put this in the chat. Yeah. Our website is kimcenter.org. My phone number is 858-344-0315. So that's a cell, and you can text or call me. And then my email is heyo@kimcenter.org. I hope this is typing properly.
And we'll repost that for the attendees as well. Thanks for providing that in the chat. We'll make sure it gets out.
Great, thank you.
Another question that we have, in a world of finite salaries and old ways of doing things in terms of gender balance, how long can it reasonably take to make a shift so that there are equal numbers of women in leadership in government and business? That's a good question.
That's a really good question. And this is a question for the entire world, obviously, as well as for our country. And this is why it's really important to do local work. So realistically, we can change a culture within a region. realistically, we can change the culture within a company or an agency. So getting back to that statistic that I quoted to you earlier about there being backlash within 2 years. So I've encountered clients who initially came to me and said, so, you know, is this a year-long engagement? Are we going to be done? You know, can we post our goals for 5 years? I'm like, no. If you're really close to being there, then it's probably more a matter of just taking the temperature, making sure you're still on track. If you're in a hostile environment, and this is why I'm talking about the local within a company or within a region, and it's different. Every region is different. I mean, even San Diego has multiple cultures going on. But if you have anywhere a range from sort of accepting to outwardly hostile environments, then you need to anticipate a decade-long process. And that's why it has to be in the budget too. And it's got to stay in the budget because people will get distracted. And this is absolutely not a response to, you know, oh, something happened, so now we need to respond. Because those things are going to happen again and again and again and again because they've been happening for centuries. So we really need to get at the systemic issue. I would say, even if you're an environment that's going to encounter that backlash within the first 2 years, once you get past that hump, you still will see measurable progress, which is why we repeat our assessment every year, because we know that even if we advise you to look for, you know, a 2% change in response to, you know, microaggressions or whatever, that's progress. And that's progress that you can pitch to your stakeholders, your shareholders, or your employees, or your public, or all of them. And then you can say, okay, in 5 years, we're looking for 5%. Let's be realistic, because people give up. It's really like losing weight or getting fit, right? If you set lofty goals that are pretty unachievable, you're going to get discouraged and you're going to give up, and whatever health problems you have are going to continue.
Another question that I'm going to read from the audience. How do you encourage more mentorship situations where women have mentee opportunities leading to future leadership? Another good question.
Yeah, good question. And actually, this gets back to the budget question too, because it's been shown in other research projects that beyond mentorship, something called sponsorship is more important. And sponsorship is an active form of the mentorship. So if you can dedicate resources to formal sponsorship programs, you will see progress. And what sponsorship looks like is, you know, I'm a mentor, I'm advising someone on how to advance within the company, within the field, but I take that extra step. And if I hear of an opportunity that my mentee is going to be perfect for, I speak up. I promote their accomplishments. I speak to the leadership or whoever the decision maker is for a particular promotion. And with that active engagement, the mentee's personal chances of advancement are increased.
Another question from the audience. Are there things that K-12 schools could be doing to narrow the gap pre-career?
Yes, absolutely. I will say that is an entire project within itself. So, and we're focused on the employer because there are so many programs focused on empowering women, but there just has been this gap on improving the environment that those empowered women are going to walk into. And this is part of our goals ultimately to improve the environment for young future employees as well. We really need to address a lot of societal things like what I was saying before about teachers discouraging girls from taking chances, from taking risks. It needs to come from the home. It needs to come from the principals. There needs to be, and I'm seeing more and more of this, which I really love. I recently did a panel for Our Lady of Peace, which is San Diego's only all-girls school, and they are formalizing their messaging through symposia that talk about empowering girls to enter fields that are, not traditionally female, to look for advancement opportunities, to speak up for themselves, as well as to address the issues that are perpetuated generation after generation. And I realize I'm only speaking for women right now, but just for simplicity's sake. But generation after generation that increase the burden on women and on females. Girls are still told, watch out for your siblings. And that just reinforces the caregiving, the additional caregiving responsibilities that women are shouldering within the household. I don't want to offend anybody, but I do have to speak up about this one thing where it's a common kind of side remark that women often make about having, let's say I have 2 kids and then a husband. And so essentially I have 3 kids. That's not okay. Don't tell your children that. They shouldn't hear that. It's not okay. And it's not good for you, and it's not good for your children.
Another question from the audience. Can you comment on the law that was passed 2 years ago by the state legislature requiring female board representation in California? Has it made a difference that we can measure so far? Is there room to expand the mandate?
Answering the second part of your question, there's absolutely room to expand the mandate, and it needs to be expanded. There has been some progress, but there are still a lot of companies that are not complying. They're just taking the fine. The expansion. So first of all, it's a step in the right direction. At least it's a policymaker. It's an acknowledgement at the policymaker level as well as basically leadership level that this has to happen and that cultural change is coming, whether people like it or not. However, the studies say that if you want to change the culture of acceptance within any group, you need at least 30% representation of a marginalized or typically unaccepted group before there's change. So we're still hearing from employers through survey and employees through surveys that, okay, I'm a Black woman who got invited to join a board. I'm the only one. I still don't have a voice. I'm still relegated to, I don't know, the marketing committee, not the finance committee, not the strategy committee. So if you have 1 out of 30, it's not a one and done deal. So you need at least to aim for 30%. And if the law really wants to have teeth in making a cultural difference, a permanently entrenched cultural difference, that's where they need to go.
We're in a world of technology. How do you believe technology has impacted corporate culture and diversity, equity, and inclusion?
I don't know that it has yet, but I am really excited to understand, to realize that we as a society are at a unique confluence of the availability of technology and social awareness, because now we have social media. We also have the ability to create surveys and implement surveys and gather research in a much more consistent fashion. Like we can, a lot of the reason in the earliest years that different studies measure different things is because they were simply created by different people. And it was an enormous undertaking. I mean, simply the number of researchers that were involved in the creation of a tool, the implementation of a tool, the gathering of data, and then the processing of that data, it was huge. And so they just didn't repeat it, is my assumption. But now, with technology, we can just do the same thing over and over and over again with the same metrics, obviously with tweaking to accommodate for changes in time, changes in culture, differences between regions and companies. We have that as an advantage. And then to be able to promote that as a, for a company that has success, for example, to be able to promote their success as an influencer. And we're trying to work with top of the chain companies who really are looked to as an example. We can spread the word instantly and create, a wildfire effect. So, and you've all seen this. I mean, we're starting to take it for granted, right? With revolutions and other social trends, it just through social media, it's happening like crazy.
So what impact does a multi-generational workforce have on the change process and sustaining change in a corporate culture? Because everybody has different beliefs and different ways of working with one another.
Yes. And this is the reason for identifying a consistent way of delivering data. You need to decide on the metrics, and it doesn't, we use consistent metrics, as I said, across industries, regions, sectors, and time, because whether you're an academic institution or a tech company, you should be held accountable to the same standards. Microaggressions are microaggressions, and there's no excuse for the number of graduates who are female in your industry, for example, or the makeup of your regional demographic, or what. There's no excuse, right? Equal status is equal status, and every generation has its own characteristic. Millennials, as I mentioned before, are much more tuned in to their employer's social impact. So, I mean, that's an influence in a positive direction. But they still are going to have to toe the lines that are established by my generation and the older generations. And so they can jump from company to company, but guess what? Most of the companies are still, perpetuating the old cultures. So really that sense of transparency is what's key. And if I'm speaking to millennial generations or younger generations, by your actions, whether you choose, who you want to work for or who to buy from or who to invest in, stick to your guns in terms of, I should probably not use guns as a metaphor, but stick to your principles in terms of what you expect for your employers. And employers, you better listen, because this is your future talent. And there are a number of employers of other generations who are absolutely tuned into the right things. Just make sure that you're measuring the right things and you're doing it in a consistent fashion and that you're responsive.
I wonder, because the world wants there to be inclusion, a lot of policy is being created, but in reality, how much and how deep are gaps between policy and practice, and how are these gaps going to get filled?
Yeah, the analogy that I like, based on my previous work in California native plants. So when you're driving along the highway and you see these vast acres of plants, and there's no discernible source of water, and we're pretty sure that the soil is clay, where are they getting their resources? How do these communities of plants survive? Well, there's actually an underground root system, which is based on a fungal network. So a plant has its roots, but if it's within a community of compatible plants, or like-minded plants, let's say, then those roots are actually extended by a fungal network that reaches to the next plant's roots, and so on and so forth. And it can cover, miles until it reaches a river or another, rich deposit of minerals or whatever. And then it transfers all those nutrients through that fungal system to the root systems of all the plants that exist in that community. And so our vision at the Kim Center is that we create a community out of a region by using employers that are like-minded, that are trying to do the right thing, and connecting. There will be the fungal network. We're connecting them to each other to bring resources and encouragement and recognition, and in that way create, in our example, San Diego County as a model of progress, and then use that model, replicate it throughout the country, and support those communities, those plant communities, through the same network. And it's all underground, but it has to be underground. It has to be in our roots, because we can't be at the behest of the latest social trend or whatever political winds are blowing at the time. I guarantee you those will change. I mean, I'm looking at the Biden administration as 4 years, because I have no idea what's going to happen after that. So let's unplug ourselves from what politics can do and policies, and let's make it part of our culture.
So one last question, Dr. Kim, from the audience. How does San Diego's unique variety of many cultures have an impact on the quest for equity and inclusion?
I love that San Diego is so diverse and so challenging because of its diversity, and not challenging in a bad way, but challenging in a really makes you think way. That's one of the reasons why I like the idea of using San Diego County as our model for the regional model, as our proving grounds for the regional model. We do have a border. We have a large refugee population. We have all branches of the military, growing tech sector, et cetera. And, to kind of co-opt New York's phrase, if it can happen here, it can happen anywhere. I really believe that. It just takes a lot of work, but it's a great exercise in being aware, in opening up ourselves to asking the right questions. Somebody recently said a great metaphor that I love. You don't really understand your own bubble until you see it from someone else's perspective. So if we start addressing the issues of immigrants within the workplace, exploited workers, all the way to female CEOs, and then the white male population experiences their own challenges as well. I mean, the expectations that are placed on the stereotypical male because of the expectations, what's left over after being the stereotypical female, those result in depression, in domestic violence, in a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. So, I mean, it's not really an answer to your question, but I'm just excited that we can accomplish so much if we are really aware of addressing every population.
So Dr. Kim, do you have any final words or thoughts that you would like to share with the audience?
I would like to thank the audience for tuning in to understand more about workplace equity. Be bold and act. Even as an employer or as an employee, the main mistake you can do is to do nothing. Believe me, change is coming. And it's a demonstrated fact that employers who embrace it will be more successful than those who don't. So why not get ahead of the curve and prioritize workplace equity now, today? Do it today. As a matter of fact, if you're a decision maker, I invite you to contact me through any of the contact information that I provided about bringing Gender Leap into your agency or your company. We're still in the early adopter phase until July. So that means we're offering all our services at cost. We're looking for true collaborations to transform your company or your agency into a model of progress that we can promote to the whole country, really. And thanks to you, Colleen, for your insightful questions.
Well, our time for this session has come to an end. Thank you, Dr. Kim, so much for this informative discussion. Thank everyone for attending this session. And now I'm going to hand it back over to our Debt Symposium leader, Dan McAllister.
Thank you very much, Colleen, and thank you very much, Hale. Terrific this afternoon, but the whole day was wonderful. Thank you all for coming today.